It does remind me, though, of the time when there used to be children's masses, always the 9 o'clock children's mass, and that was resurrected for a while and still exists in some places. We're still trying to develop something to engage our children. So the priest is asking kids at the beginning, before he began his sermon, and he says, anybody have any questions? And a little girl said, put her hand up. She says, what is it? Because she just heard this gospel. She says, what did the lady do? And then he heard a parent turn to their spouse and say, I want to hear how he answers this one. And so he thought for a moment, having been put in a very impossible situation, and then he came up with a really good answer. He said, she caused a lot of fights between mommies and daddies. Which actually it really explains it pretty well, I think, without going into any detail. And so here's the woman caught in this most serious sin. Now, we have to look at what is the setup for this. And by the way, I'm taking a lot of these details from Pastor Derek Tupper, who did a little study on this part of it. The Pharisees could have brought, he says this, in setting the trap for Jesus, the Pharisees could have done a couple different things. They're trying to put Jesus in a situation where no matter what he says, he's going to be in trouble. He says, let the woman go, then he is, disobeying the law, in which case he's in trouble with the Jewish authorities. He's teaching against the law. If he says, stone her, then he is in trouble with the Roman authorities because they did not allow the Jewish people to do capital punishment. Remember, that's why they had to bring Jesus to Pilate. So whatever he says is going to get in trouble. So the Pharisees, but here's this other part that I never thought of before. The Pharisees could have laid their trap by bringing the woman to Jesus alone, but they do it in the midst of everyone. Or they could have posed the question to Jesus without exposing the woman publicly. But again, along with their disregard for this woman, their motive was to trap Jesus. Now, they had tried numerous times to trap him with topics like paying taxes to Caesar and divorce and remarriage. Here they were using the law to back their actions up. Although they weren't completely accurate in the law, they were trying to use to trap Jesus with. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 22, where part of the law is based, it says, if a man is found in the act of adultery, both the man and the woman must die. Both the man and the woman must die. Now here they just bring the woman. So where was the man? The Pharisees only bringing the woman showed they didn't really care about fulfilling the requirements of the law, as they said to Jesus. If Jesus said, don't stone her, then they could accuse him of going against the law, which have turned the Jewish people against him. And if he had said stone her, he'd be in trouble with the Roman officials. Now, like Jesus did so many times, he doesn't directly answer the question. He stoops down and writes. He writes in the sand. This is the only place in Scripture where Jesus writes something, and ironically, the only record we have where Jesus wrote, and we don't know what he wrote. There have been different suggestions, but the most plausible one comes from the meaning behind the Greek word which is used in the first case of Jesus writing, which has to do with, it means to write down a record against someone. Writing down a record against someone. With this in mind, many believe Jesus, knowing the hearts of these men and knowing them, was listing their sins. So while adultery is a reason for capital punishment, and according to the Mosaic law, the Torah, there were others. Want to hear what some of the other ones were? Blasphemy, false testimony in capital cases, false prophecy, idolatry, incest, insubordination to supreme authority, lying about one's status upon marrying a spouse, kidnapping, murder, rape, striking, cursing, or otherwise rebelling against parental authority, Sabbath breaking, and there's more, but that's enough, isn't it? for Jesus to say, let the person who is without sin. Now, here's what happens. Jesus then interrupts his writing and stands up and makes the bold statement, if anyone among you is without sin, let him be the first to stone this woman. But then he stoops down and starts writing again. And the Greek word used here means the same kind of sin as what Jesus just referred to. If you're going to stone her for this, and he starts writing in the ground, and he's writing the same kind of sin that would require capital punishment. So therefore, when Jesus said, he who is without sin cast the first stone, he was probably pointing to what he had written. Whoever is not guilty of these sins I've written down can cast the first one. If you want to stone her, go ahead. By the law, this is just punishment for her actions. However, if you do stone her to death, you should be next for the offenses you have committed and kept secret until now. So as one writer puts it, Jesus held up a mirror for each stone, and suddenly sin had a different face. It wasn't this poor woman. It was each person who had a stone in their hand. The stone became a mirror, picture of their face. Now you can well picture the faces of the accusers blushing with shame at being found out. The Pastor Topper says, as the blood flow came back to the knuckles, the fingers extended and released the rocks, and every stone fell to the ground. And so realizing their trap had backfired, they dropped their stones and left. And interesting, it says, beginning with the elders. Now, since they were older, it's possible they had more time to commit more sins. But it probably was because they knew the law. And they knew that it wasn't limited to just this one action. Serious as it was, there were others. And they were guilty of them. Can you imagine the fear this woman held in her heart as she was standing there before the crowd, before the elders, the religious leaders, and Jesus? Her fate was basically sealed according to the law. She was as good as dead. Then all of a sudden, they disappear one by one until they're all gone. And I think one of the loveliest questions in the whole scripture is when Jesus says, "Woman, where have they gone? Is there no one to condemn you?" I think it partly shows Jesus' sense of humor, He could have easily said, knew this would happen. Nobody's perfect, lady. But for the things that they want to bring harm against you, according to the Mosaic law, they're guilty of the same kind of punishment. You're not alone. You're not the only one. And then what happens is, since it's just this woman there left, and Jesus left, St. Augustine, now I want you to concentrate on the misery of this lady. Okay, put yourself in her position. I don't mean in terms of committing adultery, but put yourself in her position of having your sin revealed before the entire community. A very serious, serious, serious sin. You're singled out, standing up, and the penalty is death. St. Augustine said that at this moment there was misery and there was mercy. There was the misery of the woman caught and her sin revealed before all, and there was the mercy of Jesus, who essentially says to her, you're not the only one. And in the season of Lent, why did Jesus come? And what did he do? And why did he do it? And he didn't do it just for that woman. He did it for all of us. He did it for all of us. He did it for all of us. Misery and mercy met. With regard to our sinfulness, whether it's large or small, it's all destructive. Some sins are greater than others. Some people are better sinners than others. Some people have Some people are more lost than others. They make bad decisions. But Jesus came for the lost sheep, didn't he? And for all the 99 that didn't wander away, Jesus came for the one as well as for the many. And so anytime you have something going on in your life where you possibly think God can't love you, baloney, because in that situation, misery and mercy meet, and mercy always wins.